Hello everybody, welcome back. So if you make as many makeup mistakes as I do, then you might want to watch this video. Even as an experienced makeup wearer over the past 10 years, I still make mistakes, which quite often you do see in my videos, but these are ways I found to fix those mistakes while you're mid doing your makeup so you don't have to take it all off and start again. And hopefully you won't make the same mistake next time, but let's do it. So first of all, something I used to do is not do any skin prep before my makeup. When I was first doing my makeup, I did not even moisturize my face. I would just put my foundation onto my dry, dehydrated skin. And even though my skin is oily, my makeup would still look cakey because I guess my skin was like sucking the moisture out of my foundation to try and get any drop of hydration. So I would highly, highly recommend doing some kind of skin prep before your makeup because it can make a huge difference to the way that your makeup applies and just how it sits throughout the day, because then your skin isn't going to be trying to eat the moisture out of your makeup. I guess drink the moisture out of your makeup. Either way, just make sure that your skin is moisturized. I definitely recommend hydrating your skin beforehand. And a really quick and easy way to do that is to use a hydrating mist like I've just done. And as you can see, my skin is now nice and glowy. This one is from a brand called Idole, and this is their White Truffle First Spray Serum. And Idole are actually partially sponsoring this video, so any of the mist sections that you see in this, I'm using this spray right here. So it separates into two layers, so you want to make sure you give it a good shake like I did at the start, and it has the oil layer on top, which is going to give extra hydration, and then the white truffle serum spray on the bottom. So you do want to make sure that you give it a good shake to combine the ingredients before you spray it on your face. You can use this before, during, and after your makeup. So as you can see, I've just applied it before my makeup to give my skin a nice glow and some hydration before I put the rest of my makeup on. The white truffle in this is their signature ingredient, which they describe as a luxury antioxidant because white truffle is known for its antioxidant properties. It can also help to smooth the appearance of fine lines. It can help with your skin's elasticity, but just generally it feels really nice and hydrating on my skin, and it's a really easy step to do before my makeup. Also, over the past couple of weeks, I've been loving using this after my makeup once I've powdered, just to bring some life back to my skin and make me not look as powdery. It is also vegan and suitable for sensitive skin, so I will be using this later on in the video, but you can find this on Amazon. It's actually Amazon's #1 face mist, so I will leave a link down below if anybody's interested. I don't know why I just applied my foundation like that. Okay, so in terms of actually fixing your makeup mistakes, a very common makeup mistake that happens to all of us, including myself, is having a foundation that is either too dark or too light. And once it's actually on your face, especially if you've just bought that foundation, and in the UK we can't return makeup products once we've already used them, to my knowledge anyway. I'm pretty sure you can't. Okay, wait, I was gonna see if your foundation's too dark. I feel like that's actually a pretty good colour match. This was just the Maybelline Matte and Poreless foundation in the shade 122. Last time I wore this, it was definitely a little bit too dark for me, but wait, let me just go see if I can find a darker foundation. This is the Lancome Teint Idole Ultra Wear foundation. This only really matches me when I have a darker fake tan on, whereas today it's not as dark. So, and I'm going to show you how to fix both if your foundation is too dark or if your foundation is too light, and if your foundation gets in your hair. This is the e.l.f. Skin Serum in the shade ST4 Formosa, which actually matches my natural skin tone perfectly. However, does it currently match my neck? Probably not. Obviously, in an ideal world, if you did have both, like a foundation that's too light and a foundation that's too dark, you could simply mix them together. However, I'm more talking about once you've already applied it to your face and then realized it's too light or it's too dark and you don't want to waste the product. This is how you can remedy it. So on the side that's way too dark, you want to take your lightest concealer that you own, and I have to say, if you don't own a lighter concealer, then you're probably a little bit stumped and you're probably going to need to take it off and start again, and maybe try mixing it with a moisturizer just to make it less coverage, or apply less of it, and that might do the trick. But you pretty much want to reverse contour with this, so underneath your eyes, and you may need to apply more concealer than you usually would on your head, under your cheekbone, but mostly around your jaw to get rid of that kind of orange line. This is the Maybelline Eraser in the shade 00. And on the too light side, you want to take a cream bronzer. This will still work with powder bronzer, but cream bronzer will probably just blend a little bit more seamlessly. And you kind of want to apply this in the opposite areas. So instead of under your eyes, you want to do your cheekbone, you want to do a little bit on the top of your forehead instead of the center. But then again, you can go along your jawline and just underneath it, but don't bring it too high up. And then you just want to blend this out. And you can already see that just by adding that lighter concealer under the eye, it just immediately brightens everything. And you may even not necessarily need as much bronzer as you do on this side. Just bring some of that down my nose. Really make sure that you blend that down onto your jaw so that you don't have a nice orange stripe. And under your cheekbone, I've just added a little bit above the cheekbone as well. Bring that onto my eyelid. And now I don't have that harsh orange line. Things are looking less crazy. And then on this side, I'm just gonna gently buff that cream bronzer into my jawline and bring it a little bit down my neck, but also a little bit up onto my face. So again, you don't have that harsh like white line this time, but you don't want to go too crazy as well, because then you don't want to end up with the orange orange kind of bronzer beard. And then I'm just also blending in the cream bronzer. You can sort of bring this a little bit further in than you usually would. As long as you've not applied too much, you can sort of pat this gently over the rest of your face just to make it match a little bit better. So I'm just bringing that down. And now they kind of match. Although I definitely need some concealer under this eye. And now I'm just gonna go in and do my concealer as normal where I feel like I need it. Another common issue that I see people have is makeup not sticking to their nose, or their makeup kind of separating on their nose, or just their makeup separating in general on their face. There's a fair few reasons why this could be. It could be, like I said at the start, if you have dry skin, or just even oily but dehydrated skin. If you've got nothing on there and maybe you're not exfoliating properly, you may have dead skin sitting on top of your skin. Dead skin sitting on top of your skin. Dead skin kind of on the surface, which is going to be enhanced by any makeup. So you want to make sure that if you're having that issue, try exfoliating well. I would recommend a chemical exfoliant rather than like a proper scrubby gritty one. My favorite is the Ren AHA tonic, but it is quite expensive, so if anybody knows a dupe, let me know down below. But that is so good at getting rid of like dead skin cells around your nose and just generally on the rest of your face. Because if you're using something like a retinoid or like skincare that's supposed to help with your skin turnover, you then more than likely need to be exfoliating to get rid of that kind of extra dead skin. So it could be that you've not exfoliated well enough. It could be that you've not hydrated your skin enough and it doesn't have enough moisture in it. So like I said earlier, your skin kind of sucks the moisture out of your foundation, which is then going to leave it looking kind of patchy looking. So try moisturizing it. It could be that your moisturizer or your skincare or your primer is not mixing well with your foundation, and that's kind of a bit of trial and error, which is really frustrating. I've seen some people say that it depends, like if your moisturizer is silicone based or water based, then you should use the same silicone based or water based foundation. However, I have different variations of different primers and foundations, and some of them work together and some of them don't, even if they're both water based or silicone based. So that one seems to be a bit of a trial and error for me. Another reason could be that your beauty blender is too wet. If you are squeezing your beauty blender and getting the water out and there's still water dripping out of it, it's probably too wet. I way prefer to actually take a towel, and once I've washed my beauty blender, squeeze it with the towel to get as much moisture out as you can, because if it's too wet, sometimes it's going to blend your makeup really weirdly. And on the other side of that, if your beauty blender is dry, again, it's going to suck up your foundation and may go on a little bit more patchy. And another major one, if your beauty blender is dirty and is full of product, I've actually left this one to show you an example. This is one of my beauty sponges that I've used, and as you can see, there's kind of like foundation gathering on the top of it, and it's all kind of clinging to the sponge. Like if you then go in with a beauty blender or even like a powder puff or a brush that is full of product, it can actually then do weird things to your makeup, which I think some people don't even really think of that. So I would highly suggest every time you're using your beauty sponge, not only dampening it, but making sure that you're washing it with like some soap, because if you've got that kind of sticky layer of foundation, if you then reapply your foundation with it, it could then just be picking up your foundation. I mean, look how much more product is on that now, and it's probably lifted quite a lot of that from my nose. If you're having major issues with separation around your nose in particular, you can actually use an eyeshadow primer like underneath your makeup. I've seen a lot of people say that that helps. I personally don't have the problem of it all kind of separating on my nose, but I really think a lot of the time it's down to your skincare, not having exfoliated well enough, and also maybe the products that you're using, or just maybe a bad foundation, or just maybe your foundation is too matte, because my makeup definitely looks a lot worse when I use like a matte foundation compared to a more glowy foundation. But I would also as well definitely suggest pressing gently instead of swiping like this, because if you are, oh my god, it pains me when I see people putting their makeup on and they're doing this with their beauty blender. I'm like, you're literally just swiping off the product and moving about any of the products that you have on underneath there. So then obviously it's going to kind of bunch up and look weird and take bits off and not have good coverage. You want to gently press, whether you're using a brush or a sponge, just dab gently, especially around the nose, to really get in all those crevices. But maybe when you first put your makeup on, it looks fine, and then throughout the day, if your makeup then starts to go patchy looking, or it starts to kind of like crack and separate on your skin, a way that you can combat this, it's not going to make your makeup look perfect, but if you are out and about during the day, I would recommend take a powder foundation with you. And what you can do in this instance is take a powder foundation, take a powder puff or a brush, lightly press on those areas where it's kind of separated to add some of that coverage back in. And like I said, it's not going to look perfectly flawless, but it would definitely look a lot better. And I would then suggest going back in with a hydrating mist just to make your face not look as powdery and cakey. But really and truly, powder foundation can be your best friend. It is such a handy tool to have in your your makeup kit. One of my favorites that is affordable is the Maybelline Powder Foundation, just because this has got really, really good coverage. I also like the MAC Studio Fix Powder Foundation. That's really nice. Another common mistake that I see people doing is applying their bronzer too low down. So if you're applying your bronzer down here, it's probably going to drag your face down. But let me just show you what to do in this situation if you have done this. If you've applied your bronzer this far down, either like you've just got the placement wrong and then you look in the mirror and think, oh, that's just made my face look either wider or just like really looking like a bit droopy. A way to combat that in the future is try applying it pretty much directly on your cheekbone or just like a little bit higher up than you usually would, and use a smaller brush. I think sometimes people use like a massive brush for their bronzer. So if you have done this, again, you can take your concealer, like a lighter concealer, or if you're doing this with powder bronzer, you can use a powder foundation and just use that to kind of cut and clean up the bronzer. So it gives you more of like a definition line and an appearance of a higher cheekbone rather than lower. Same exact thing if you've given yourself a wonky nose contour. I don't know how you would quite go this wrong with it, but maybe you've just done the wrong shape and it's your first time contouring your nose and you've messed up and you're like, oh no, I've ruined my makeup now. Again, same thing. Take your beauty blender with a bit of concealer on it, just dab over and you should be able to blend it out really easily. It's probably easier to correct when you've not set your face yet, but if you have set your face, take some powder foundation on a powder puff, go over it, gently press the powder foundation on, redo your nose contour and then rehydrate with the setting mist. And now I can go back in with the shape that I actually want. But I don't always get these things right, you know? I make mistakes all the time. And I've been doing my own makeup for, I don't know, like 15 years almost. Well, that makes me feel old. But using a smaller brush in this area definitely helps. This one is from Spectrum. It is the A32 brush, but any small medium density brush would help. I have made a video all about my favorite brushes, so if you are interested, go check that out. The next one is so easy to do, and I do this all the time, and it is if you are putting on your blush and maybe it's new and you're not sure how pigmented it is, or maybe you just forgot, like I do on a regular basis. If you've put on way too much blush and you're blending out and you're like, what do I do now? Stop what you are doing. Put the brush down. Don't think that you can blend this out with the same brush, because the more that you do this, it's just going to spread more and more product around your face, and then you may get to a point where you can't save it. Just basically take a different brush or take a clean sponge or a sponge that's got a bit of concealer on it, and depending how bad this is, you may just be able to pat this away gently with a clean brush, but I would suggest focusing on the edges to blend out and kind of diffuse the colour. If you need to, you can go in with some concealer, but again, just pat over this. You don't want to drag it all over the place. Gently pat. This is with my foundation brush. If you need to, you can add some more concealer. I think there's a little bit left on my sponge, but a sponge is such a good tool for kind of soaking up any excess products that you don't want and just gently diffusing a product. I'm just going to take a little bit of concealer just here and just gently blend this out, and no one will ever know. By the way, this all applies for if you've not yet set your face. If you have set your face, again, powder foundation is your best friend. There you go. No one would ever know. What blush? A way to combat this in the future is try using a smaller brush and start off with less product. Less is more. Or what you could do is apply it to the back of your hand and just dip your brush into it. That way you can kind of test the waters on the back of your hand first. This next one pains me a little bit to do, but I'm going to do it just to show you how you can correct it. So if you have set your makeup, if you don't blend out your concealer beforehand, you may find that you're setting your creases into place. So I'm just going to take some powder and I'm going to zoom you all the way in for a start. But can you see, like, I have concealer that's sort of settled into my lines here. Usually I would always go and blend it out first, but if you set your makeup into place with those concealer creases, can you see here? And if you then look in the mirror and you're like, no, my concealer's already creased and I've only just set my face. A way that you can kind of combat this is to take a small eyeshadow brush or a small fluffy brush, basically a small brush that kind of fits into that little crease. Look straight ahead into your mirror and just try and get into that little crease with your eyeshadow brush or your concealer brush or whatever kind of brush you're using. Probably helps if it's a little bit more dense and flat like this one. You just want to really get into that crease, and you may be able to kind of disrupt some of the concealer that is sat in those fine lines. But if you then think, oh, well, that's just taken off all of the coverage, you can go in with a powder foundation, or you could try putting a little bit of concealer, but just a tiny bit. Although I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting cream on top of powders because it might make it look even more cakey. But make sure that your eye is kind of like fully stretched open like this, and then just apply just in that area where you've removed some of the coverage, because you don't want it to look too heavy. A little tiny bit of your powder foundation. Then dip into your actual powder that you were using and re-powder just that little area. And as you can see, there's now no concealer line sat in the crease. And my under eye is still looking nice and set and smooth. And then on the other side, I am just gonna blend out the concealer first. And then you have to do a bit of like a scream face to set your face. I'm gonna set. By the way, the exact same thing applies. If you find that your makeup is creasing in your smile lines, the number one thing that I would suggest to do to combat that, I would suggest removing as much of the makeup as you can from your smile lines before you set your face, and don't put too much product in that area. However, if you've set your makeup into place, or just throughout the day you think, oh, my makeup is gathering in my smile lines, you can do a very similar thing. Literally just in this area, take a clean brush and buff away some of that excess product, or if it's separating there. I mean, it's kind of hard to show you because I've only just put this makeup on, so obviously it's not separated yet, but quite often throughout the day I will find that my makeup is gathering here, or sometimes I will just take my finger and just kind of re-pat it back in. But you can use a brush, get rid of some of that, and then again you could go back in with a tiny bit of powder foundation, or just generally I find a little bit of translucent powder just over the top. Just patting that gently over the top can kind of help blend it all in and it looks normal. And exact same thing applies for powder. Push into your skin with either a puff or a brush instead of swiping all over your face. Another problem, which isn't even anybody's fault, but if you have particularly watery eyes and you find while you're doing your makeup that your eyes start watering and then it removes your concealer or your eyeshadow or whatever you've just put on, that can be the most frustrating thing. And I sometimes get that in the summer with hay fever. I get like excessively watery eyes on my outer corner, or some people get it on their inner corners, and it can remove like a section of your makeup. I'm just taking some water on like this mini Q-tip and I'm gonna try and ruin my makeup in that area as if I have just had a watery eye episode. The first thing I would say to do in this situation is do not touch it. Wait for it to dry. Don't think, oh, I need to pat that dry, because you're probably going to make it so much worse. If you can, sort of tilt your head back wherever like the wateriness is and fan, or even take like an actual fan and fan your face until it's dry, because you want to make sure that it's dry and it doesn't kind of like drip anywhere else. And it can be tricky because once you've powdered this area, it's kind of hard to then go back in with concealer over the top of powder and make it look normal. However, in this instance, you're kind of in a bit of an emergency. So what I would suggest doing is take a fluffy brush. If you've got a smaller one than this, even better. And then take your concealer, put some on the back of your hand. Don't immediately go in and try drawing concealer on, because you're probably going to put way too much on. It's going to be really hard to blend out and it's going to look so much more obvious. Put a tiny bit of concealer on the back of your hand and pick some up on this little brush. And then you just want to look into a mirror and just gently kind of buff a bit of that concealer over that area. Use like small little circular motions to kind of buff out the edges of that mess that you made. I actually think sometimes it's beneficial to use a concealer that's not quite as bright as the one you already used, because can you see the brightness of the concealer kind of clings to where you've already set your makeup. I'm just going to mix a bit of my foundation with a bit of concealer on the back of my hand. But the reason I'm doing this on the back of my hand first is because you want a small amount of product, otherwise it's going to look a lot more obvious. And now you can go back in with your powder and reset that area just very gently. And okay, it's not a perfect fix. If you look really close up at my face, it does not look as flawless as the other side, but I feel like this blends it enough to the point where people aren't going to notice. They're not going to be looking that close up at your face, especially if you apply mascara or any eyeshadow. Another great little trick, if you still find that you get creasing underneath your eyes, a good way to disguise this is actually to just take some bronzer and put it directly in that area. So just along the lash line where I quite often get creases, I do find that if I have a little bit of bronzer there, it's kind of not as obvious, and also the layer of bronzer sort of helps to set it even more. And you could use eyeshadow, but I'm just using bronzer for ease of use. And then you can go in and add some on your lid as well to make it look a little bit more cohesive. For this next one, I am just going to demonstrate. I would not usually put this much powder on, but I'm going to go really overboard with the powder just to show you what I mean. If you have applied way too much powder to your face and you look in the mirror and think, oh my god, I look so flat, when I turn my head to the side, there is no shine on my face. Like, it's just flat, dry. A hydrating mist is your best friend. Again, I'm using the Idole one, so I just need to give this a good old shake. I just cover the front of my hair because it goes curly really easily if it gets wet. Also, I forgot to mention, this has such a nice fine mist. Let me just wait for it to fully dry so I can show you what it looks like when it's not actually wet. Can you see now how that's just given me a bit of life back to my skin and a little bit of glowiness, like on my forehead, on my cheeks, just to make me not look quite as flat anymore and make everything kind of melt in together and look a bit more skin-like. Especially if you have dry skin and your makeup always just feels a little bit dry and dehydrated on your skin, this is such a good way to actually give some moisture back into your face once you've put your makeup on already. It just gives that extra bit of glow and just makes, well, my skin personally, I find it just looks a little bit more healthy and a little bit less makeup-y, a little bit less cakey, and it takes away a lot of that powderiness. And sometimes if I put on too much powder, and if anyone else puts on too much powder, I personally find that then my blush and highlighter doesn't quite stick as well to my skin. Sometimes we'll just kind of brush away because it's like matte on matte. Whereas when you're adding a little bit more of that moisture back into your face, then you should find that your blush and highlight will probably stick a whole lot better to your skin. Exhibit A. Another common mistake is if you're filling in your eyebrows and you have gone a little bit heavy-handed. Okay, if you filled in your eyebrow like this, and you, I mean, some people might like the eyebrows like this, but if you filled in your eyebrow and thought, oh no, it looks way too blocky, I'm gonna have to start again. Wrong. Step 1, take your spoolie and try and soften it with the spoolie, because sometimes this can actually get rid of some of the product and make it look a little bit less harsh. Grab a little thin angled brush, take some concealer. I'm just going to use some that's on the outside of this concealer packaging, which has got a little bit messy. Just going to dab that on the back of my hand. And you can kind of reverse eyebrow contour. So I'm going to draw in some little lines with my concealer just at the front of my brow where I don't want it to look as blocky. I've just added some concealer in between some of the strokes to mimic brow hairs kind of. I'm then just going to set that in place with a little bit of loose powder. And then at this stage, when it's looking a little bit crazy, you can go back in with your brow product, redraw in some of the strokes that you meant to at the start, and then to get rid of some of the weird ashy lookingness, take a tinted brow gel and just go over everything that you've just done lightly. Maybe I went a little bit heavy-handed with the brow gel, but you get the gist. It now doesn't look as blocky as it did before. Or another method, which may actually work out easier, is take one of these tiny little mini pointed Q-tips. These ones are from my Kiko. They're called the On Point Cotton Buds. I'll try and link these down below, or if I can find something similar. Dip some into some micellar water and just carefully, without disturbing all of the makeup around it, remove your excess brow product. Again, go back in with a little bit of concealer, either on a small brush or your sponge or on a fluffy little brush like this. Add a little bit of powder and again, redraw in the front of your eyebrow. Just adding some tinted brow gel and we're good to go. Okay, wow, my eyebrows are very dark today. Maybe I should have gone a bit lighter handed with them, but same with your eyeliner. If you have done your eyeliner too thick or if you've done it at the wrong angle, say for example, you've messed up your eyeliner, it's not the shape you want it to be, you want to crispen it up a little bit. Crispen it up? Is that even a word? Again, I would recommend taking a concealer that's not too light, but one that almost kind of matches your foundation shade. Take some concealer on either a flat brush or an angled brush and just gently go around the edges and then clean it off on the back of your hand and then just kind of dab. Instead of like dragging it all over the place, you just want to gently dab to blend out the edges. Or you could use one of the little Q-tips to remove it and then just do what we did with like the watery eye situation. But I'm just going to take some powder foundation and just go over the top of that and just fix it up a little bit more. You want to try and not move the product around too much, otherwise it might smudge some of the black around and make it look even darker in that area. And then finally, before I go in with my mascara, I'm going to go in with one last spritz of the Mist for the truffle glow. I can't really think of any lip mistakes other than just going outside the lines, in which case you could use some concealer to just clean it up. And then finally for mascara, I feel like everybody knows this by now, but if you are happening to do your mascara and you make a mistake and get some on your eyelid, so I guess just for the purpose of this, just try and deliberately get some on my lid. Okay, there we go. Do not touch it until it is fully dry. Otherwise, it's just gonna smudge all over your face. And yes, fair enough, if you have a big old blob of mascara on your lid like this, sometimes it's gonna mess up your makeup and you may have to re-add a little bit of concealer or powder foundation or something just to fix it. But please, wait for it to dry first, because it might just flick off. And in some instances, it literally will just flick. Oh my God, I didn't even mean to just get that on my nose, but hey, I guess it's part of the video. Not gonna lie, getting it on your lid is a little bit easier than fixing it on your nose, but it's still fixable. While I'm waiting for that to dry, if I find that my inner corners are watering, such an easy fix for that usually helps is just taking a little bit of your highlighter and putting it over the top of wherever it's watered, and it kind of deflects from the problem as well. Okay, so have I left this to dry long enough? I really hope so. Let's try it on my eye first. So you wanna just take a spoolie, either from an eyebrow pencil or just one that you have in your makeup kit, and just gently buff over that mascara and hope and pray that it's gonna come off. And you should be able to get the majority of it off this way, especially if it's just like little pieces like this one. Like that one just completely flicked off and I wouldn't have to go in and reconceal. On this side, I'm probably gonna have to add a little bit of concealer or powder foundation just to add back some of the coverage. And then exactly the same on your nose, just be careful. Flick, 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 flick. Okay, that got off the mascara without smudging it because it was dry, and now all I'm gonna do is just go back in again with a powder foundation, add a little bit of extra coverage. Annoyingly, it sometimes will take off a little bit of your nose contour. You can't really notice, but I would notice that, so I'm gonna go back in with a little bit of my bronzer and some of my blush and highlight as well, just to really blend it all back in. And there you go. Oh, I was wondering why my face was looking a bit odd. I forgot to add more bronzer to my forehead. I would usually add bronzer like here and here, but I forgot to do that. That's better. So everybody, those are a bunch of different makeup mistakes and how I would correct them. I hope some of these things may work for you. You might know all of these already, in which case I'm sorry that I've just wasted your time. But if you didn't know some of these things and it was helpful, then please give this a thumbs up. That would really help me out. I hope it was helpful to some people. And if all else fails, you might just need to take it off and start again. But hopefully these things can prevent that. I will link everything down below that I used in the description box. Thank you to Dalba for sponsoring the face mist part of this video and giving me some nice glowy skin. I will also of course link this down below on Amazon. Let me know if you have any other makeup fixes, I guess, for mistakes, because maybe I'm missing out on some. And I hope you guys are doing really good. I will see you in my next video. Bye!